97,966. This represents the number of businesses that have permanently closed in the US. 97,000 families without income, 97,000 entrepreneurs' hopes and dreams crushed for reasons completely beyond their own control. So let's talk about the impact of small businesses and what's being done to help them and a potential hopeful silver lining to all of this. For some context, I am a small business owner myself. I own a moving company and a storage company. I've owned all kinds of different businesses for the majority of my life, at least the last 10 years or so since I was a young teenager. And at the current moment, I have about 20 employees that work for me right on the other side of this wall here. And really for most of my life, I've been working to be as good at business as I absolutely can. And I just really empathize with anyone who starts a business, who works hard to just follow their dreams of working for themselves and just trying to become something, to make something bigger than their self. Being an entrepreneur is hard, it's lonely. Your odds of success are so extremely low, and then to have all of that completely crushed for something that you had no part in doing is something that I can't even imagine. I've been lucky enough to have a business that we were impacted pretty severely, at least in the beginning with the pandemic, but we will survive. I was lucky enough to have zero debt with the business at the time of the pandemic hitting. We're extremely lucky, but most businesses were not that lucky. And I just have so much empathy towards those businesses that closed. According to Yelp, 163,735 businesses have closed since the beginning of the pandemic. 97,966 of those closures are permanent. Those businesses will never open their doors again. A major issue here is permanent closures are primarily small businesses. Large businesses, on average, have a much easier time surviving any downturns because they have greater access to funding, more people know about their business, more potential investors can put in funding, lending capabilities are much higher, they have relationships with banks and other lenders, and if it's a public company, a large public company, that means they have access to public funding as well. Small businesses, on the other hand, especially small, under 20, under 30 employee businesses, it's very hard to have a good relationship with a bank. There's not a whole bunch of people who know about your business and are willing to put in money because it's so risky to own a small business in the first place. The access to funding is just so low for a small business, and for most small businesses, it's hard enough to survive in the best of times. So if something happens, you're just not likely to have the reserves it takes to survive a downturn. So that's why we're seeing so many small businesses just crushed, because it's so hard to have 6 months worth of savings, because in what world would you ever need 6 months worth of savings for your business? So let's look at the facts and figures of the 97,966 permanently closed businesses. This comes from Yelp, who has access to near instant business data, but this app is going to be much more popular to restaurants and businesses who serve consumers. So I actually fear that these figures are lower than the true reality, because a business-to-business company isn't likely going to be on Yelp. Not all home services are going to be on Yelp. It's just one avenue. But this is the best data that we have. The hardest hit area is restaurants. Restaurants are already known to be very delicate businesses with slim margins as is and a low chance for success as is. I mean, everyone knows of a restaurant that opened up and was closed within a year. So throwing in a health crisis in the mix is just a recipe for disaster for restaurants. And we think of a restaurant, someone opens a restaurant because they're like, I love food, it's my dream to open a restaurant, I've always wanted to. Let me take a shot, let me put in all my savings, let me open a restaurant and just see what happens. Well, 61% of closed restaurants during the pandemic are permanently shut down. They will never open their doors again. Just thinking about how many dreams were crushed because of that is just mind-blowing. And we can see this everywhere. I can think of 4 restaurants within a mile of my house that are just no longer there anymore. It's just empty suites, no more business. Some of these places I've been to, and it's just crazy to think, like, there was a sushi restaurant by my house that I went to 3 or 4 times within the last couple of years. And it was just one of those small places, you go in, it was a couple who owned this. The wife was the hostess and the server. The husband was making the sushi and back. It's just one of those small, cool little places, completely shut down. Their doors are closed. And it's like, what are they doing right now? They're closed for something that, again, had no fault of their own. The next hardest hit area is retail, where 58% of closures were completely permanent. Now with retail, most of these closures are smaller retail stores. The especially hard hit ones were men's clothing and gift shops, which doesn't come as a huge surprise because a lot of guys don't look at getting new clothing as a necessity, and gift shops, of course, are not a necessity either. And this is kind of the reoccurring theme. The more necessary the service, the more likely it is to survive through this pandemic. We also have bars who have seen 54% of their businesses closed permanently. And this is a number that I think is probably actually on the low end because many states still haven't reopened bars. So I have no idea how a bar could remain open at this point. I can't imagine my business being completely closed since March. I mean, we had revenues down about 50 or 60%, and that was hard enough to get by, but we knew you were gonna get by. But to be closed for 5, 6, 7 months with zero income, I don't know how these people are doing it. So I think that number with bars, unless they start opening up quickly, but still the public isn't going to be flocking into bars as quickly as they were in the past, we're going to see that number with bars increase even higher, I think. Another hard hit area is beauty-related businesses. With this, we have 42% of closures being completely permanent. And I have some actual experience with this firsthand because on the other side of this wall here, I have a big warehouse where we do storage, and in a large portion of the storage over here is a hairdresser business it was a woman who had opened this business a few years back. The pandemic hit, they had to close their doors, and they just could not afford their rent anymore with no money coming in. It was much cheaper just to have storage, and now they've decided they're just going to liquidate everything and they're just slowly going to start selling off the stuff back here. This is something that probably would not have happened if it weren't for this pandemic. The areas that we've seen some of the least amount of closures, again, are kind of the areas that you think of as more necessities. Professional services like lawyers and accountants were really not hard hit at all. They account for less than 3 in 1,000 closed businesses, and many home services account for less than 10 in 1,000 closed businesses. Landscapers landed at about 9 in 1,000 closed businesses were landscaping companies, just for an example. Another reason I want to just talk about all this, whether you own a small business or you work for a small business or not, the health of these small businesses in the United States are so important, and really you should care. Since 1995, small businesses have been responsible for creating 2 out of every 3 jobs in our country. And they account for 42.9% of US payroll. When you think of business, you think of these huge like Google, Facebook, Amazon. But they're trying to have as few employees as possible, and they have systems and the technology to limit the number of employees. These small businesses that just don't have a ton of money to spend on tech to replace jobs are the people who are hiring people to do things. Everyone knows people who work for small businesses. It's so important to the economy. And also just the dream to be able to open a business and be successful and earn more money and make a living for yourself is so important. I mean, it's the American dream to be able to do that kind of thing. And we need this because if everyone feels like, if I open a business, we might just have another pandemic, the government might force me to close, I might lose everything for something that I have no control of, is a terrible place to be because we want these entrepreneurs taking risks and getting rewarded for those risks. So now that we have the data, we have the context, let's talk about what is being done. We had the Paycheck Protection Program, which was a wonderful program for small businesses. However, the downside of this is it only paid for 8 weeks worth of expenses. And in the beginning, this seemed like more than enough. In the beginning, it sounded like it might be 2 weeks to 2 months that this pandemic would last, and everything would be back open and we'd all be good again. Well, as we're seeing, it's much, much longer. And we need more funding. There's been a lot of talk about getting more Paycheck Protection funding out because there's actually $130 billion in funding just sitting there unused from the first round of the Paycheck Protection loans. But there hasn't been much progress. Both Democratic and Republican sides agree that we should repurpose this funding and give it to small businesses, allow them to reapply for another round of Paycheck Protection funding, but negotiations on this have been at a standstill for more than 2 months now. We've seen zero progress, and that money is just sitting there unused. And every single day this money is going unused, more and more businesses are failing. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you may notice that I just haven't been posting as much about these stimulus updates because, frankly, there just hasn't been nearly as much happening. There's been hardly any progress. And yes, I could clickbait videos every single day like I've seen many channels doing where it's like, finally, the stimulus check is passed. Every single day they have some title like that. And yeah, you'd click on the video, you'd watch a minute of it, but then you'd be mad at me. And what good does that do? Just raising people's hopes and being dishonest. I don't want to be that. I only want to post things when I have valuable information to actually give out. And that's really the reason for fewer videos in the last several weeks. One little piece of update here, it just wasn't enough to merit an entire video, is just this morning both Secretary Mnuchin and Nancy Pelosi separately stated that they are looking to resume stimulus negotiations. Now this is an important piece of information. This could potentially be huge, but I don't want to go ahead and say, hey, something's going to be passed within a week because they said this. It looks like they have come to an agreement on the government shutdown and some funding there, and now they're going to go back to stimulus negotiations, which my fingers are crossed that is going to happen. But again, I don't want to promise anything. It's better than no news. It's better than bad news. And I know we all want something like that to happen and for negotiations to actually go through. I mean, this entire video is really just to highlight the absolute need for more stimulus. I know many people don't own small businesses, but I just want to highlight how important these are to the country. So this entire video has been a little bit depressing. I prefer the happy news, but I just wanted to stress how important this is. Businesses are closed, people feel lost, jobs are lost. It just feels like there couldn't be a silver lining. But let's explore how this situation will greatly benefit those who take the right steps. We have nearly 100,000 small businesses that have closed in the US permanently. If we estimate on the small side that each of these businesses did $250,000 a year on average, that equates to over $24 billion in revenue that went to these businesses every single year. And you know where this $24 billion is going to go? To other businesses. Sure, you could say spending is down, and it is. It's down about 10% right now, but that would still leave us $21.6 billion that will be spent. This is going to go to the restaurants, the lawyers, the cleaning companies, the bars, those businesses that stay open or open up. There will be a huge opportunity in the near future for those who are not willing to give up. I argue that the next year will be one of the best times ever to start a business. People are scared, competition is down, rents are much cheaper. I got this warehouse 1 month before the pandemic hit, and I had to spend 5 months of negotiation just to get this space. If I got this space 3 months later, I would have been able to get it at 40% less cost and much, much easier negotiations. And I know many of you are thinking, I can't even afford food or my rent right now. Why would I think about starting a business? But if we look back in history, most money is made when things are bad because people are scared when things are bad, but things always inevitably get better. And that is what's going to happen. And that really is the silver lining here. Now's the time to take calculated risks and seize the opportunity instead of dwelling on the past. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.